Okay, hello. Oh shit, that's probably really loud. Fuck. Okay, hello.
I don't know that joke.
You put a piece of sheet music in front of them.
Oh, okay, sure, gotcha.
Yeah. But no, I think that you're right. And I think that it's this sterilization kind of education. It's probably born out of the 19th century, of just this. I think it happens with all music too. That's why classical music has become so irrelevant to a certain extent, is because why would I go listen to a live performance of somebody playing, the Chopin piano concerto when I could get on Spotify and listen to Rubinstein or, one of the best pianists ever, do it.
There was also something, when you
okay.
mentioned that too, something that's really disappointing to me, because I come from a jazz background. I don't remember the name of the book. I read a really interesting book a long time ago when I was in high school about the old great, like, a lot of old good composers were also piano players, because you kind of had to be, or harpsichord or whatever. Most of these people, I think, were expected to be able to improvise pretty well. That there's a lot of repeated phrases and passages in classical, romantic, whatever, piano songs, and they're not supposed to have just been repeated, but usually the composer himself is improvising something new there. And that was a skill that was completely erased from classical music. It's all rote memorization. You never see improvisation in a classical setting, which I think is really sad to lose that, because that would be like a source of potential interest in any type of concert,
Oh, exactly. I mean, there were treatises and books written on this shit, mainly by Emanuel Bach, Bach's second eldest son. He wrote a whole, however many sonatas it was, I don't know how many, 50 or so, sonatas for the Kenner und Liebhaber, meaning the knowers and the doers, and love-havers, amateurs and connoisseurs. So basically, if you were a composer, it would be expected, or a musician of any worth, it'd be expected that you would be able to vary the reprise or, improvise on, the melody that's already been presented.
Mm-hmm.
But Emanuel Bach knew that not everyone could do this, because there were a lot of aristocrats, that took lessons, and, they didn't devote their lives to doing that shit.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he did is he wrote out a whole series of sonatas where he wrote out all of the embellishments that one could do on the repeat, so that it would kind of be a teaching tool to say, well, these are the possibilities that are open to you whenever you do repeat, a section of the music, which I think is a super cool pedagogical tool that, was invented in that he came up with in the 1740s or 50s. Mm-hmm. I don't know when that was published, but anyway, suffice it to say that, I think that performances are incredibly dull and uninspiring, mainly because, for the past 200 years we've said, no, you have to play exactly what's on the page. You try to, it's this kind of idea of, doing exactly what the composer said or this or that, which I think is complete, phooey. I mean, it's just, these composers, wanted their music to be human and live. And I mean, as you know, from the jazz background, of course you want to listen to John Coltrane or Charlie Parker, but there's a lot of advances that have been made since then, and people are doing cool things with solos and this and that. So when you go to a jazz bar or this or that, you're intrigued by, well, what is this guy going to do after the head, and is he going to, how is he going to do this solo? Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of anticipation and that kind of interest, is necessary. And I think that it makes the live performance just so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I think that perhaps classical music is coming out of that. Like I said earlier, with new music and the way that early music is being performed these days, mm-hmm. I think that that's becoming a lot more popular. But I think that people are tired of going and dressing up in a suit to, go sit in a dark concert hall and be quiet for, a couple hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
it seems like people are, it's a bad thing. People treat it in a very boring manner. One thing.
Hello, people. How's it going? Talk to me. Tell me about your lives, your desires, your secrets, your whims, your struggles. Give E. What is E? Are you talking about estrogen? Estrogen. And Safe for Work Discord channel, please. Okay, we can do a Safe for Work Discord channel. We'll make that now. Yep, that's him. Das Tiny.
Thing that people forget too is, like, classical music that we listen to today, like, a lot of this stuff wasn't necessarily made to be enjoyed by a normal person. Like, this is it's a difference between, I think it's like cultivated versus vernacular music, right? Like, this is stuff that was commissioned by fucking royalty for a bunch of aristocrats to sit in a room and listen to, not necessarily something like a random person like, oh, I really want to enjoy this recreation, like, this is gonna be a lot of fun or whatever, right? It's not necessarily the same thing,
Sure. I mean, there were of course, over hundreds and hundreds of years of music history, there were times that, the middle class was really empowered by music, and, they knew of Beethoven because they'd go buy some of his sonatas and play them at home, but that doesn't mean they went and necessarily saw a symphony.
True, or even when it came to Beethoven, I think this was a complaint. I heard that he complained that when he would go to perform, obviously, even today, the Moonlight Sonata is still an incredibly popular piece at C# minor. He would complain that every time I go and show you, everybody just wants me to play this song over again. Even he was getting irritated by the amount of requests that he would get for that piece. I don't know if that's a rumor or myth or that actually happened. I remember reading that before. I could believe that.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not, but it would make a lot of sense, and it would make a lot of sense that Beethoven's piano works are more popular at the time than his symphonies, because that's something that can easily be consumed in the home, as. But yeah, I mean, opera and then of course home music like that were widely popular. Although I think that going to the opera.
I think we're doing all right. It's probably just a few more days, and it's gonna be rough, but I'll get through it. My fever's not that bad today. It's just my voice is so fragile. Yes, I am also hoping for the best. Yeah, I mean, I think that my COVID case is not bad enough to really cause long-term damage. Just because I think a lot of the long-term damage that people get is from actually having to be intubated, put on oxygen, or from hardcore coughing, or from severe fevers, which actually damage the structure of the brain. I think as long as you don't have those things, you're not too at risk for the long COVID. Yeah, if you're being hospitalized or intubated, yeah, you're definitely not in a good place. You're already sort of fucked at that point. 3 weeks is brutal. I don't think it'll be 3 weeks. I think I'll be back to normal in a few days, probably. Potato, get in Twitch chat. Yeah, I'm doing the restreaming, so it's split. There's most people are in Twitch chat. We've got Potato only in YouTube. Plugging away, going strong. Even though most people seem to prefer Twitch.
Someone of the middle or lower classes would have been awful. They.
Black communities were really, really good at this. I don't know why, but black communities are so good at reusing all of their shit. So you had the old singers, and then when you started early music, and the people that view it, where I learned this phrase once, it's called musical quotation. I love it, where people kind of quote other music. But sometimes people say I guess it's just plagiarizing. People just won't do it because I don't know. That's weird to me. Yeah, people should.
Well, with some of the lawsuits that have come out, over chord progressions. I mean, but of course, a lot of classical music is public domain. So
yeah, that's yeah, most of that shit should be public. That's all that music you can dig into to start ripping shit up.
But the recording of it might not be, so you might have to get an orchestra together.
Yeah, re-record. That's what Jay-Z does for a lot. Jay-Z sometimes won't sample things, so just bring in a new group and re-record some of the songs because he can build the sound. He can do that with, yeah.
Totally. I think a problem is probably the classical music world itself. Seeing that kind of reproduction of Beethoven is not fitting for mumble rap, or some shit like that. But I think that completely misses the point of the purpose of getting music out there, any music, and all music. I mean, it's not going to be important if it's not consumed. Yeah, I think you have a good point there. But yeah, no, I haven't seen much of a willingness of contemporary artists to sample.
Fair enough. Yeah, YouTube chat, Twitch chat, rivalry. Let's have it happen. I'm gonna offer for people to play chess with me. I think it's a 3-minute game though. I don't know how long I set it for. But we can play Twitch. Or we can play chess for a little bit. I'm like really bad at chess, so I don't think that like I'll be much of a challenge for anyone who really knows how to play chess properly. But there's a link in case anyone wants to play. Sweet. Oh man. Chess is for gay people. I agree, quite frankly. Interesting. If you're gay, you probably love chess. You're probably like, oh my god, yes. And if you love chess, you're probably homosexual as well. So, yeah, I think that's how this works. Oh fuck! 1 second. Fuck this goddamn lighting. Okay. Nothing is really happening here. I lost my queen. I'm not really paying attention. Let's see. Whoa, a bottle of pink vodka lemonade. That's crazy. I'd love to get rid of guys. Makes you think, huh? Makes you think. Same moves here. Now is a good time to drink it. I think so. I think now is an amazing time to drink it. What's wrong with 1 p.m.? 1 p.m. is good. All the more reason to drink it, I think. My night is no longer defended, but it's okay. I don't feel as out of it as I was the previous days. That's good. I mean, it'd be nice. There's like no play over here. I just don't like this guy. Okay. hanging out, playing chess, vibing, brutally vibing. Okay, now our pawns are undoubled, so feels pretty good. We've got like tons of material advantage. Just may as well threaten the knight and the pawn, which is pinned. Ah, good stuff, friends. An incredible game. It was an honor and a joy and a privilege to play chess with you. And if I was given an opportunity to relive one moment of my life ever again, it would be this moment playing chess with you. Okay, Destiny is gonna talk, so we're gonna hop into Discord probably. Okay. I'm also gonna pull up Restream. Let's see, what is Destiny doing? Is he... Oh my god.
Well, I guess I'll probably sign off. This was just a blast. I'm glad that I...
What does that translate to? A couple hours or something? 600.
I think he's playing like a solar game.
But I'm gonna turn it down to 1 minute per sub. Oh, he's turning it down, boys.
Oh, he has an elite game. We'll give him some time.
If you guys just keep spamming calling the scammer, he'll get triggered. Because I would get triggered. Don't do that though, I'm saying. He'll get triggered the fuck out. Okay, what? Why am I not making those things? Oh, because I'm making processors. Why am I not making... Processors.
Rawr. That's me eating you, munching on you. Imagine that I'm eating you, that I'm munching on you. Are you imagining it?
I'm not making enough.
Imagine it. Imagine seeing my mouth wide open, like as I go.
Okay, every 1 second, I need 1 silica.
Think about
so I
it.
can handle 30 of these machines with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Steven. How's it
How's it
going?
going?
1 second. Okay, if you want to put on video, I have that as well.
Do you have a preference, or do you not care much?
I think video would be nice. Gotta have that connection, you know?
Okay, gotcha. All right, what's up?
All right. Not much. I got COVID. So I've been dealing with that the past few days, which is brutal.
Nice.
But I'm vaccinated, so like it could be much worse, I suspect.
It could be. Damn,
Yeah.
that's everybody. We're all getting it now, huh? That's how it's gonna be. That's
It's
how
insane.
it's gonna be.
Everyone's just gonna get totally vaccinated, or there'll probably still be breakthrough cases, but yeah. Seems endemic. Not good. Not fun.
Not good. Not fun and not good. True. Both of those are true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, is it true that you accidentally did meth in Amsterdam?
Maybe.
Maybe.
It was some sort of big amphetamine, and I don't think I'll never know what it was. But whatever it was, it kept us awake for anywhere from 36 to 48 hours.
That's
So
fucking crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's this like sort of approach to like drugs and imbibing and knowing what is okay for your body that is like sort of libertarian, which I've always respected. And it's this idea that like if you like do the research, you should have like the ability to like choose what is right for your body. And of course, like where that line is and where it's okay, I think varies a lot from like drug to drug. Like with heroin, you know, maybe it's good if we have like some cultural or social or societal blocks, some hoops to jump through before you can actually get access to that kind of material, because it's can be so addictive and dangerous.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, it would depend on the thing. Real quick, before we start, because no one has any idea who you are, do you want to introduce yourself and everything?
Yeah, sure. You can call me April or Taftaj Taf. I post sexy selfies on the internet, and I've gotten quite a bit of attention for that, so it's gone well. But sort of in the background, my like big hobby is just like consuming Twitch politics. I think it's like my favorite soap opera, so I've just like consumed tons of it.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm trying to like branch out a little bit more, try new things, talk to people.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. What did you want to chat about today?
I think trans stuff would be cool. I saw your talk with Mr. Girl, and I think that Mr. Girl has like some admirable qualities, but his understanding of trans issues is like fundamentally centered around this idea that he could like talk people out of being trans, which just seems like fucking crazy to me. I mean, if that's true, it'd be like fantastic, and it would totally change like everyone's conception of what being trans is. But provided, you know, that's not true, it seems like all the rest of his understanding of trans issues sort of falls apart, and I think it sort of hinges on this like tenuous understanding.
Yeah, so I'm gonna
yeah, push back, please. I'm gonna pull up a notepad.
Yeah, so we can argue about what I think, and then I can try to tell you what he thinks or why, but I'm not going to be able to. I don't think I can defend his positions. I don't know if I agree with him as much. So I guess we'll kind of try to navigate that. So my understanding is that it feels like he bases a lot of his understanding of trans issues off of maybe a couple stories. Namely, one is where he talks to his ex, or not ex. I keep saying ex. It's not his ex. It's his current girlfriend. And that seems to be something that he builds a lot of his current understanding off of. But that might not necessarily be true. So I don't want to like hold him to that position, because maybe he has other reasons for thinking what he does about these things. And also, I don't know if he thinks that all trans people can be talked into being trans or not. It was hard. I didn't think we ventured into that part of the conversation, but yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to get those two things out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, to his credit, I think the thing that Mr. Girl does well is that he fundamentally seems to be interested in advancing the well-being of trans people.
Hopefully, yeah.
You know, I'm just providing him like the benefit of the doubt. Like if I take his words on their face value, it does seem like if it were true that trans people could be talked out of being trans, that would be a fantastic medical option, an intervention to deal with the psychological distress that people experience as a result of being trans. And I think that's something that you don't really see in a lot of discussions, especially on the left. So like when you hear people talk about trans issues on the left, you hear people say things like, we don't want to gatekeep, we don't want to have as big of a tent as possible, want everyone to be sort of welcome. And I think it speaks to this broader leftist political project, which is to like consolidate and create groups of minorities that can be used to like especially erode traditional institutions. Like gender would be the traditional institution that is the target of erosion here. And I think that in the trans discussion, you might have noticed that like in Twitch politics, it sometimes feels like everything gets brought back and boiled down to trans issues. It gets brought up constantly in debate panels where it makes no sense. And I think that once you start understanding it from the political lens of people are trying to build coalitions, and it's advantageous to have those coalitions be as welcoming as possible, you start to understand why the discussion is so rarely on how to actually help trans people, and in fact so often on the political and cultural implications and really objectives of the left wing.
Okay, I'm following you on this. I don't think I necessarily agree, but I don't think it's really relevant, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that is valid for why some people bring trans issues up into everything, but I don't know if that's why everybody does it, but go ahead.
I'm glad you say that, because I don't want to be like conspiratorial and be like secretly like all these leftists, every time they bring it up, they're just like trying to accrue basic political power. Like maybe, I don't even think Vosh would say that. And Vosh is like the quintessential person who says like everything's about power fundamentally. So it's hardly, I think, a conscious thing if it does exist. I think it does like subconsciously. It's something that people are engaging in. Sure. But there's this political author. I don't know if you know him. His name is G.K. Chesterton. Have you ever heard that name?
Okay. I know one political author, and his name is Wikipedia, okay? He's taught me everything I know about politics, so.
That's a good one. And also probably like the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a harder one, okay? That's the hard Wikipedia. When I want to do philosophy debates and I buckle down and I really want to study, I bring out the Plato Stanford.edu one. Yeah, true.
Those are the classics. When I was in high school, I like started a philosophy club, and I ran it for 4 years. And every week, I would just like open up Stanford Wikipedia, Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and just like get an article and I'd present on it. So I'm very, very familiar with the trenches. But G.K. Chesterton, he basically describes this scenario where he says that, two people are walking in the woods and they come across this stone wall. And the first one says, wow, this stone wall in the middle of the woods has no purpose. It's just, hanging out. There's moss growing on it. We ought to tear down this wall. And another, his partner is walking with him. And he says, hey, we found this stone wall. We don't know exactly where it leads to, but maybe it has a purpose. And the intention with this analogy is to sort of point out the mentality of progressives and conservatives when they're coming across cultural or societal institutions. These are the stone walls that sort of gird our civilization or our existence. And the argument he's making is that progressives are very quick to want to tear down the walls without really understanding why they exist.
I don't mean to say like I've thought of every original thing, but have you heard me talk about this before?
No.
Okay, gotcha.
But you have heard of this like Stonewall thing?
I haven't, but I've independently stumbled upon this. So something that I'll bring up a lot when I'm sure a lot of people have. I'm not trying to sound like a philosophy master, but I notice sometimes I used to engage in a lot of like analysis or informally we'll say deconstruction of topics, right? I don't think that's actually what deconstruction is, but like I'll like think of like, okay, well, like why does this institution exist? Why do we have gender? Why do we have sex? Why do we have marriage? And then do we need this? And then can we reformat this in a way that is more inclusive to other people, right? So for instance, when we think of the term of like gender, oftentimes we're associating genitalia with it. Do we need to do that? Is that necessary? Maybe not, and if it's not, then there's like additional groups of people that can be brought in under that umbrella in a beneficial way. So I think that's cool. However, one thing that I noticed, especially over the past year or two, is people are so quick to see something as a social norm or be socially constructed, but when they hear socially constructed, they think totally arbitrary, irrelevant, and has no value whatsoever. And I noticed that a lot of people on the left on the internet are running really far with that, where they'll be like, women don't need to be enslaved in marriages. We don't need traditional gender roles at all. It's like, okay, that might be true, but there's probably a reason why they existed like this for so long. And I think it's really important to understand that reason, rather than to just say we can get rid of everything and rebuild from scratch,
That's, that yours put really well. I'm just going to add you 1 second. It seems like you have a pretty nuanced view of this. So I'm impressed already. But basically, 1 second. Okay. So your inclination, your impulse to sort of reform and question these ideas, I think is the key here, right? That reform. Because we can recognize that there are elements of gender that are legitimately really toxic, right? So like, when a man is told over and over not to express his feelings, not to, outwardly discuss things, that's something that can manifest in negative ways. when a man is told, when a woman is told that her place is like only in the home and she can only be raising children. But I think that, it can be easy to like look at that and just take an inch into a mile. And so we know that like gender as a societal construction can actually have like really useful impacts. So like an example of this is that like we know that children who grow up with a father figure in the home have miles better outcomes, right? And it's not only that there's two parents in the household, but it's actually like we have some understanding that there are parenting styles, and that some of the parenting styles that men are encouraged to engage in, they complement really nicely the parenting styles that women are told to engage in. So like if a child, gets hurt, the parenting style that we've sort of prescribed to women is to be really matronly, really caring, like, oh, what's wrong, and that's good. That teaches the child they're loved and cared for.
Yeah.
And the fatherly style is to, assure them that they're going to be all right, be like, all right, you're good, get up, you can keep playing. And that also has value. And so I think that we have to sort of acknowledge that across civilizations and across human history, we see overwhelmingly there are certain patterns that are cropping up as like cultural technologies, specifically in regards to gender relations.
Yeah, and this is, again, it all plays into this idea where it's like, okay, maybe we can change this a little bit, but if it's shown up relentlessly so many times, there's probably some like very valuable underlying function that it's serving. So if we are going to replace it with something, we have to ensure that that primary function is still being satisfied. Otherwise, we might be getting rid of something that did have some level of great value. The closest concept that I tie this into, I'm very much an atheist. But as I've gotten older, I see that there is a fuck ton of value in religion, especially the community building aspect that I didn't really understand as much growing up, just being kind of a militant atheist and somebody that didn't care about community. But I noticed that like in the strive for secularity, we tossed out all of the theology, which was cool, but we also got rid of all of like the rituals and all of the community aspects of religion, which isn't cool. That was probably like really valuable because it seems like religions and all that have been around for all of human history, and we can see like a function that they serve that was important.
Yeah, religion's a great example of this. Just hitting on this topic, for a second more, and then I'll continue with the religion, because I think it's great that you brought that up. Either there's something that is really effective about like gender relationships and sort of gender roles as a cultural force that keeps people, in good health or keeps civilization well, or there's something like biologically ingrained. Those seem to be like the two conclusions that I would draw from the fact that like almost every successful civilization has had, some form of gender roles. So that seems to be the two cases. So we need to be really careful when we're like deconstructing this wall to not be destroying useful things.
For sure.
But in regards to the religion aspect, I think it's more than that too. When I was like 13, I was like big into the atheist sphere on YouTube.
Yeah.
I watched like The Amazing Atheist and all of these people.
Thunderfoot and maybe even
some Sargon of Akkad. Yeah, all of these people. And I think also like Christopher Hitchens. But there's this like argument that would get brought up from theists, and they would say things like, without a God, like how do you have morality? And when I was a 13-year-old atheist, this was the kind of question that I would respond with like, that's ridiculous. Like, of course I have morality, because morality is like a human thing, and it's very natural to have morality. And like, just because I don't have your belief system doesn't mean I'm going to be some amoral monster.
Yeah.
But I think that once we start entering into these like more materialist, grounded ideologies, especially ones that put out on the horizon some conception of utopia, some future society that is, gleaming and perfect, I think we can really quickly run into scenarios where we're justifying horrible acts in the moment on the basis of achieving these like material successes. And so there's this, this like question in philosophy, and it's like, why why reason with someone? Why debate them? Why discuss with them on open and level ground and try to understand their belief system if you can just enact through power politics your will, or just like club them over the head, you know, and exert your force? And I think it's because fundamentally you have to have some moral conception about, at the very least, rationality being something to be valued, right? And that's a value statement, fundamentally, a value statement about the morality of reasoning that you can't justify. You just have to like a priori accept that reasoning is something worth pursuing.
Gotcha. This is like the basically we're saying like normativity precedes epistemology or whatever, right? Which I think is probably pretty agreeable generally. I don't know where most philosophers stand on that, but it seems necessary that you have to acknowledge the value in something before you can begin to even talk if the truth statement is worthwhile or not, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think fundamentally that's sort of a religious conception, and it needs to, or I mean, I say religious. It's a conception that is like faith-based.
Faith,
and,
faith, I was gonna say faith is a good word there.
Yeah, and it comes before, you know, these sort of like rationalist arguments. And I think that's another example of, you know, it can be easy to like tear down and try to deconstruct these ideas, but you really have to understand, you know, their purpose. And the purpose of having like faith in sort of universal ideals is they help gird and prevent society from breaking down.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, yeah.
So in regards to trans stuff, I think that I sort of wonder if you're ever like totally exhausted with these conversations, because they seem to come up so often.
I'm not exhausted with the conversations. Areas. The conversations are super interesting. I'm exhausted by how many people want to have them without ever having thought about them for like 2 seconds first. I think that's the more exhausting thing to me. Because I think there's a lot of I don't mean to, it sounds bad because I'm kind of fetishizing the concept, but I mean, as a cisgender person, I mean, I can really only ever intellectually engage with transness, right? Like, it's not like a personal topic for me. But I like, so not to sound disrespectful, I guess, to trans topics as I mentioned it, but like, I think that trans topics are interesting because they allow you to explore a lot of questions in society and figure out like where certain concepts come from that are taken for granted. So that might be something as strange as like, how do we decide what is a fair body in a sport, right? Well, you know, we have gender, obviously, or sex or whatever we call it, depending on, you know, where you're at. You know, gender or sex, we have men and women that compete against each other. Okay, well, that's obviously, we need to do that for, you know, fairness. But we have other things too. What about like weight classes? Or what about like, you know, we have weight classes on other things. We don't have like height classes on a lot of things. It's kind of strange, right? So like that, it opens up a lot of interesting questions. Like, well, what's fair when it comes to competition? It also opens up a lot of interesting questions when it's like, well, what is a man or what is a woman? And I've had really interesting conversations before when you find out that like, we don't really know intellectually what a man or woman is. It's kind of a thing that we intuit. And when you start to question it, you run into very quickly like these like weird moral dumbfounded positions. I had an argument with Sargon before. I was like, well, what do you think is a woman? And like he would give answers where it was clear he hadn't thought about it. And he's reaching like, well, the ability to have a child makes you a woman. And it's like, well, really, what about like an infertile woman? Is that still a woman? And his response, I think, to justify the decision is, well, that makes you less of a woman. And it's like, well, really, is that really the response you want to go with? Does that really make
that's
the
a hard
most
road
sense?
To go down.
Yeah, because then it's like, now, first of all, what does that even mean? Are you subscribing then to an infinite genders thing? Because to be less of a woman or less of a man implies there's more than just man or woman. Because most people view that as binary if you're anti-trans, right? So it's just like, it's a long-winded way of saying there's a lot of interesting material that comes up that you can discuss that's peripheral to trans issues by introducing that as a concept or a talking point. Yeah. But most of the concepts just boil down to, do you hate trans people or not? Because if you don't fully believe me, you're transphobic, and if you do, yeah. So it's really boring really quickly sometimes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
It's cool to hear that. I guess you're not totally bored by the conversations. And it does seem like they do connect. They're sort of at this like flashpoint in the culture where they connect to a lot of disparate ideas. For sure. I wonder, okay, so one thing that I do disagree with you on is like trans do yourself healthcare, like gray market hormones.
So the do-it-yourself healthcare for trans stuff to me is actually the exact same conversation as vaccine mandates.
Okay, that's interesting. Tell me about it.
I think that there are actually a lot of as much as I am pro-vaccine and even maybe would be pro-vaccine mandate, there are a lot of good arguments, I think, against mandating vaccinations. I can see those arguments. I don't agree with them, but I think they're strong arguments, and I can respect those arguments. But the problem is that 99% of vaccine mandate arguments are built on horseshit anti-vax information. So chances are, if you tell me that you're against vaccine mandates, you're about to say some real stupid shit. When it comes to like the do-it-yourself hormone stuff, my understanding is, depending on the country you're in, I think in the UK was last time I saw it, it can be like 2 years to wait for some types of hormone therapy, okay? And if you're prepubescent or going through puberty, to be frank, you're fucked, right? That's a really, really rough prescription. If you know you're trans and you're 14 and you're being told that like, well, you know, come back when you're done with puberty and we'll see what we can do for you. It's like, okay, well, fuck my life, right? Fuck
it's
me,
not
I guess,
fun.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see the value there in the like, well, you know, if you're really committed to this and, you know, there's no other way to get these types of drugs, here's the do-it-yourself hormone route. You know, like we're going to provide a level. It's basically mutual aid for trans people in a way. The problem that I have, though, is, oh my God, the communities that exist around this shit are so fucking weird to me, at least in the Twitter space. It makes me really uncomfortable with it. When you get like people that are like bragging about like, I talked to 7 minors last month and I got all of them this sick HRT shit. And it's like, that sounds really fucking creepy. It sounds really weird the way that some people engage with it. And that ends up being my problem with it more than the concept of like do-it-yourself hormones, I guess. That was a long-winded, sorry.
Okay, so I've also seen like people post like the iridescent like anime girl like estrogen bottles, and they're like, it's very like marketed as a product rather than like a healthcare solution. I do wonder if part of that and the difficulty there is with the sort of demedicalization of transness and the sort of insistence that it's just a gender identity thing, and that it can be more and more disconnected from any underlying biological like drive or need to do something. Because once you disconnect it, it just becomes like a fun way of like presenting yourself.
Yes. So like we don't have to get into this if you don't want to, but a huge problem that I have with a lot of the current talk about trans stuff in the very far left spaces online, which is every space on fucking Twitch, is that in my opinion, it turns transness into just like a clothing or another way to express yourself. So when people start talking about like autism, gender, and all of this stuff, and like gender and sex, they don't really mean anything, and it's all kind of whatever. It makes me wonder, like, okay, well, why the fuck do trans people kill themselves then over this shit? Like, why would you do something so stupid? If gender and sex are all arbitrary, irrelevant things, why would you ever commit suicide because you're the wrong gender or sex? It's so dumb, right? And I feel like those conversations start to miss this rejection that there is a fact of the matter about your sex or gender, which I believe there is, and I think it's the source of trans issues, is that there is an underlying fact of the matter in your brain about what you feel your gender is. That's something that really bothers me, and a lot of these discussions end up revolving around that.
Yeah. I had a discussion with Bastiat a while back, like years back, and it was about trans stuff. And I took a position that is sometimes called transmedicalist. I don't know if you've heard of this.
That in order to be trans, you are required to have gender dysphoria?
Yeah, that was, so I had like the weakest
Oh shit!
You're
like
this.
The ultimate transphobe online then. So
well, I had like the weakest
that they
one.
hate the most.
I think someone in the chat said like, okay, you're the only trans medicalist that I can respect. Basically, my position was that like you have to have some amount of dysphoria to consider yourself trans, and I was like, that can be like whatever, but you're absolutely right, and maybe we'll talk about like how insane the dialogue has gotten, where like that's the ultimate transphobe position, but my fundamental argument was that, like, if you take someone who experiences just dysphoria and is spending, like, every week or so, they're, like, breaking down about their body and they're struggling, and it's a constant source of shame and disgust and difficulty in their life that they have to do this, and it prevents them from, pursuing jobs or careers or whatever. And you take that kind of person and you compare them to someone who is transitioning just because they want to, but don't really need to. They're not going to break down if they don't. I would say that like there's a disservice in language if we're describing two fundamentally different groups of people with the same word. And I think it creates problems, like especially in like issues of law where we're talking about where do we house trans prisoners? And well, if trans is just someone that like anyone can be or not be and doesn't necessarily correlate with dysphoria, well then why can't trans prisoners just detransition? I mean, ultimately it's not something that is baked into their brain, so they should be able to just like take it off like a shirt. And I think that's like a really dangerous philosophical position to get into, where you're sort of boiling it down to just identity. But also the culture has changed, and like I don't think that the transmedicalist definition of transgender is one that the culture is going with. So like I don't
For sure.
use it. I've like given up on this battle, even though I think it's like philosophically incomprehensible to describe both these groups with the same label. You know, that's just where we are as a culture right now.
Sometimes it, and this is a frustrating thing, I don't mean to ascribe bad faith in it. Sometimes it feels like what people want to do is they should really use a different label for something, but they want to be able to call in all of the semantic power and severity of one term, and then use it to describe something kind of different. So like an example of this, I'm trying not to branch off into a topic where we're going to fight over, because I don't want to like sidestep too much, but like I would say like rape or sexual assault sometimes can feel like it gets there, to where like you might have a boyfriend or girlfriend who, they're tired and the significant other really wants to have sex, and they're like, I don't want, whatever, okay, fine. And then they're like, yeah, please, can we do it? And then you go along with it, and then people are like, that was rape. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, was it shitty? Yeah, kind of, maybe. Like, was it rape? And they're like, well, there are a whole bunch of different types of rape. And my response is, and it always triggers people, okay? My response is, okay, sure. Maybe there are a whole bunch of different types of rape, sexual assault. But that means that when you tell me in the future somebody got raped or assaulted, I'm not going to think it's a really bad thing. I'm going to need more information there to have a feeling about it. Because apparently not all like rape or sexual assault is that big of a deal. Sometimes it just sounds like somebody was just being like a little shitty, Because it feels like people want to draw in like all of the power of a certain word, but then they want to dramatically change like what it could stand for, which irritates me sometimes, because then it can take away theoretically from some of the people that are dealing with those issues. So for instance, when you get a whole bunch of people that are super happy and healthy and they're cool and they're like, yeah, I'm trans, but like, my gender identity is female, but my gender expression is male 100%. I have no dysphoria whatsoever. Never going to take HRT, never going to do SRS. I just don't really care that much, but yeah, I'm trans. It's like, well, fuck, like you might be, but your experience is like trans used to encompass a certain experience, and when it gets broadened so much, it kind of means nothing. And in some cases, like liberals or progressives understand this. We'd be like, well, why call it Black Lives Matter? Why not All Lives Matter? Well, because if you call it All Lives Matter, now we're not focused on the important issues, on Black Lives anymore. Okay, why do you call it feminism? Why not egalitarianism? Well, if you're going to call it, egalitarianism, well, we're talking about like women's issues. That's important. It's like, okay, well, why can trans mean every single person with every single identity ever? Well, because I want to be trans. Like, okay, whatever,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that like I struggle with, because when I tell people I'm trans, I don't want them to think that it's just like a passing phase.
No gender.
Like I had to like fight for people like my family to like take me seriously as like this is something that's like I need to do and engage with, because it's like it's not going to go away from me. I had to like fight to prove that to them. And sometimes I see the way that people talk about being trans online, it like hurts me a little bit, because I think it erodes some of that fight that we've had to go through of like proving how important this is. And I think that's a really sad fact, but it just speaks to like the ever increasing desire to like weaponize these terms for sort of political arguments. This is going to be like a sort of spicy take, but I think the same thing has happened with racism. I read Ibram X. Kendi's book recently, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And in it, there's this chapter where he talks about microaggressions. And the example of a racist action was, a black girl not being called on in class. And maybe that is like a legitimate, example of like a serious racist thing. But the way that it's presented in the book, there's like no context to like really understand that it is racist. Like we don't get a sense of, the reason why she might have called on like another kid instead, whether the other kid was like typically very quiet. We just don't know. But the thing that he says is that like it's not enough. We can't just call it a microaggression. We have to call it what it is, and that's a racist, aggression on someone.
Yeah.
And I think this is like an absolute disaster for like actually calling out racism. Because like racism is horrible. It's like one of these like unique evils in life that most people can recognize as something that just feels so deeply unfair. And yet we're calling things racist that like I think it just like waters down the idea.
Yeah, and my understanding, I treat everything in life like a medical prescription, right? The reason why we categorize things in any way, whether it's language or literally categorizing things in our brains or whatever, is because there's some utility to it. There's a reason for it. We get some sort of function out of doing this. And when things get broadened so much, the utility is either diminished or it sometimes becomes like the antithesis of what the word was supposed to mean. So like if I call somebody racist, well, traditionally, if I think that there's somebody that's a racist, like, okay, I know this person thinks about people a certain way, and it's going to take a lot to move them off of like a certain position, right? So let's say there's somebody that thinks that black people are genetically inferior to white people, and they truly believe that they have like a warrior animal gene, and like this is a fundamentally different, right? My conversation with that person is going to be way different than like a racist woman that thinks that curly hair is like ugly in black people always, and they need to straighten it, right? Now, is the woman that thinks that like all natural black hair looks ugly, is that bad? Of course. Could it be considered a microaggression? Absolutely, in certain circumstances. Could it make black people feel really shitty, especially black women? Absolutely, 100%. All of that is true, but it is a fundamentally different type of thought than a person that genuinely like hates or views black people as inferior or fundamentally different than white people. And when it's all called racism, it's like, okay, well, fuck, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to say. And I said this, what I just said before about rape and sexual assault, I said it with everything now. Whenever somebody tells me, like, oh, that person's racist. Okay, and I don't know what that means. You have to give me more information. Like, oh, that person's white supremacist. I don't know what that means. Are you telling me that they, like, called the cops one time and they're white supremacists?
That
or like,
person's
oh,
a fascist.
Yeah, fascist. Like, what do you mean? Like, they voted for a Republican in their local election? I don't know what the fuck. Like, all of these words mean nothing anymore. And they're all used all the time for everything. But the problem is what I said earlier is even though the words get diluted, the severity of the word is still there. So if you act racist, meaning you make a dumb joke or you say something dumb about somebody's hair, it is just as bad as like the explicit approval of lynching somebody, and you'll be treated the same. Like if you make a comment, let's say you do a dumb joke or you rap to a song or something stupid, you shouldn't do it or whatever, but let's say you do it, people will treat you the same as though you're Richard Spencer or Nick Fuentes. And I was like, holy fuck, like chill. Like it's not fair to smuggle in all the severity of what these words meant, but then broaden it to include, you know, like 50% of human activity. I think that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you put it well. And I think it speaks to also like just the way the society has moved, you know, probably for the last 600 years, but certainly since, you know, American history. We've just gotten further and further left, right? So like the right used to be defending, you know, aristocracy and the monarchy and the Catholic Church. And then it was defending, you know, slavery. And then it was on the other side of the civil rights movement and then of gay rights and so on. And conservatives today are, you know, much left of conservatives of the past. You know, we have like Caitlyn Jenner running on the Republican ticket in California. And in Canada, we have their conservative party is like pro-abortion. And so, you know, the culture has just moved progressively left. And I think that what happens is either, you know, if your beliefs are truly based in like principle and you derive them not from your external culture, they're going to be sort of set, right? And they might change a little bit as you get new information. Hopefully they do. But they're not going to move with the culture. And so eventually you're going to become a conservative or eventually a reactionary. And I think that what people on the left have done is they've sort of implicitly recognized this, and they've tried to stake out positions ahead of the progression, right? So like someone like Vosh, who's like very progressive now, is probably going to look good in like 5-10 years as we move further left. And so I think this creates like an interesting dynamic where either you move with the culture and you continue to be a liberal, you move faster than the culture and you're a progressive or a leftist, or you move slower than the culture, or you move backwards even or just, you stay still and you eventually become a conservative or a reactionary.
There's this really weird phenomenon where 5 years ago, I was like the farthest left cuck soy boy ever. Conservatives fucking hated me. Centrists, like anti-SJW gamer bros, hated me. And even a lot of left-leaning people saw me as being like pretty far left. And my positions have moved a little bit over time, some to the right, some to the left. But for the most part, I'm either where I was like 4 or 5 years ago, or I'm a little bit left of that, more or less. But now, as the years have gone, so about 2 years ago, leftists started to fucking hate me. They found out that like, oh wait, Destiny's not a communist, we hate him. So everybody on the left called me a conservative and a Nazi, and everybody on the right called me still kind of like a soy boy cuck or whatever. And then I had like this centrist audience. I was like, oh, he's a centrist, I like it, whatever the fuck that means. And now today, it seems like the conservatives of the internet are like, oh, Destiny's like a really reasonable person. Like, I like how he has these conversations. People on the far left, I'm basically Hitler reincarnate to them. And then some center-leaning people like, Destiny's okay, but he's kind of a jerk or whatever. And yeah, and it feels weird because I'm like sitting here like watching everything move so far off. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like, it's like I can have conversations with conservatives on the internet who will be like, yeah, I just don't want trans people playing sports, but otherwise I'm okay with it, right? That was in the 90s, that was impossible, okay? The 2000s, unfathomable. 2015, maybe. But like now it's like, okay, holy shit. But there's, to borrow words from my hated daddy, Jordy Peterson, I disagree with a lot of what he says, but he talks sometimes about this concept of there being a tension. And I think that tension is very important. You have one side advocating something, and you have another side advocating something, and that pull is always going to keep, even if you agree more with one side, it'll keep it grounded. And it feels like that string got cut because everybody's in their own like echo chambers more and more these days. There's less crossover in communities, and now you get these people that are running so far off into one direction. Like if you want to put a number, a quantifiable number for it, right? 5 years ago, 15 an hour, 15 an hour, 15 an hour. That's what we talked about. And then once you had this decoupling of all the media online, where you're like, okay, 15 an hour, you literally had people saying like 15 an hour, that's the base, that's the loser start. 20 an hour, 25 an hour. You see people saying like 25 an hour is the negotiated position. Like, what the fuck world are you in? Some states I'm thinking are still like 10 an hour, 7.25. I don't even know what the minimum wage is. Like, you're nowhere near that. Yeah. And yeah, that oh god, yeah.
Do you think this is a recent phenomenon, or do you think this has been going on for a while?
I think that it is recent.
Okay.
And every single generation feels that way. Everybody always says this is the worst generation for polarization and everything. The reason why I think it's recent is because I think we're at a unique point in human history where we have very, very, very powerful technologies that are financially incentivized into separating us into groups and shoving ads down our throats. And I think that incentive has made for a very unique environment. The internet is unique in that you no longer have to confront opposition in real life. If you believe that the moon landings were fake, 20 years ago, your friends are going to make fun of you for it. You're going to have to talk to people around you. Now you can find any group online you want to reinforce whatever belief you want. And there are companies that are incentivized into keeping you in those groups because they want to keep you watching content for as long as possible,
Interesting. Do you think that perhaps the tendency of social media platforms to highly regulate and like ban people off is going to contribute to this effect? Allowing spaces to become more and more polarized? Or do you think that moderation is probably a good thing?
It's a really hard, it depends on what, like,
I'll interject.
Moderation is a good thing, but we're going to disagree on or maybe we won't disagree, but like I would disagree on the type of, like moderation is a good thing. You probably shouldn't be allowed to post child porn on Twitter. I think we can all agree with that. That's
fair enough.
But like, should you ban somebody because they, state certain political positions, depending on how controversial they are? Like, I'm not too sure about that. Like, yeah, it gets weird. But yeah, go ahead.
There was, I wish I knew his name. There was this organizer for a Middle Eastern terrorist group. He got very popular on the internet a while back. He became very radicalized. I believe he moved to Morocco, and he got radicalized initially through like Malcolm X and being brought into the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay. And
basically, after he's left, terrorism, after he's left organizing for terrorist organizations, he's talked about how he's done a lot of research on how people are radicalized on the internet. And some of the information or the research indicates that just like banning people off these platforms creates this effect where you just move them to like another private platform. So what they do is they create their own website and they create their own chat rooms, and they're no longer being challenged. And so the problem either worsens or stays about the same. I don't know if that's going to be true, across all platforms, or if it's a unique situation to the terrorist organization. But it does worry me a little bit, like when we see like Donald Trump being like outright banned off of Twitter, or some of these private social media platforms that have enormous influence in our day-to-day life. And maybe for the most part, they're pretty even-handed with how they moderate. I think they're pretty even-handed right now. But when it comes down to it, I think that if there's going to be like some way that they swing, Twitter is not going to swing in favor of the right wing. I think they're going to swing in favor of the progressives. And that's an enormous amount of cultural force to be putting, I think, in the hands of one party. It's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you'll see that like even across Reddit, like certain subreddits are basically every subreddit is political.
Have you seen the Herman Cain Awards subreddit?
I have seen it, yes.
That is mass psychopathy. Holy shit, dude.
Sure, it gets a little bit crazy for sure. It reminds me a little bit of like, have you heard of like Child Free or? Oh yeah, that gets crazy. Even if you don't like children, they fucking hate children.
Yeah, holy shit, buddy.
But but you'll get all of these subreddits that are like left leaning, and then every now and then you'll stumble across one like the political compass memes. I don't know why, but that's like a subreddit basically for far right people. It's like really weird. I didn't know that until I stumbled into a few threads. Like, holy shit. But yeah, that lack of engagement. I don't know who I want to. A lot of the times I'm blaming the left, but it might be what I really mean to say, or I try to make people aware of this. I'm blaming the left now, but it probably has to do more with like when you're the dominant political faction. This is just how you tend to exercise your power. Because they talk about the left likes to deplatform people today and everything. But like when I was growing up, okay, conservatives were mad as fuck about putting happy holidays on Starbucks cups, or they wanted to ban all gay people from like any music or movie or anything. So like the right has definitely done this as well in the past. But I noticed this trend online where, and I don't know how many Discord communities you're involved in, I identify this. If you have left-leaning people and right-leaning people in a server, there's two ways that this goes. Eventually, the left-leaning people start to escalate, like, we want to ban this type, but you can't say these jokes, you can't make these things. And the demands will grow until either they're basically saying, you need to either curb or ban all of the conservative talk on this Discord, or we're going to go and leave and make our own. So every Discord becomes either this far-right Nazi radicalized space, or it becomes like a far-left tanky Mao worship zone, and there's nothing in between. And anytime you'll get these servers online that have conservatives and liberals or leftists or whatever on them, like other leftists will try to get these servers shut the fuck down. They'll be like, there's Nazis on that server, there's conservatives, they're transphobic, they're racist, or homophobic, and they'll try to find anything and get them all banned. And it's like, okay, fuck. That deletion of any common area, like where we're all segregated into our own political houses, I think is so negative. And I think it is relatively unique to this time period now.
Yeah, because the technology access is just so completely different. But, I mean, one thing you said was that this seems to be a consequence of, like, the dominant cultural political platform, right? And, like, in the past, you would expect it to be the opposite way, right?
That conservatives would be exercising this because they were the dominant political...
Sure. And maybe you see that with, like, McCarthyism, right? But it also seems to me that, like, McCarthyism is very much the historical anomaly, whereas, again, for the past 600 years, perhaps longer, perhaps a little bit less long, but we've just seen like a progressive shift leftward on things. And so it seems to me that as far as cultural force, the left has always had a really strong control of cultural force, even if it didn't have the political institutions. And what I mean by that is, like, when Trump took the White House in 2016, he took executive power, but the media system was still like overwhelmingly liberal and arrayed against him. And the intellectual systems of like Harvard, Stanford, as well as just general colleges were still arrayed against him. Professors were still, arrayed against him. And so that's what I mean when I say like the left has continued to have this dominant cultural force, even when it doesn't have political control. And that stretches back like much further. If you're looking to like really, I think, challenge left-wing narratives or to just interject some nuance into discussions, what you really need is a right-wing intellectual movement. You don't need the right wing to gain political power. You need them to like have a voice in media or in the academy to actually like talk about or just question their ideas. And really, I think the right wing is in this position where a lot of right-wing positions are they're kind of fucking insane. So like the QAnon shit is fucking insane. Anti-vax shit is fucking insane. And it's because like these people aren't like seriously having to challenge each other, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree 1,000,000%. I used to say that if like I think when I was like a libertarianish person like 5 or 6 years ago, I used to like, I'm not fully bought into the left stuff because I was way more conservative when I was younger. And I'd always say like it sucks that there's not like a conservative or Republican party for people that aren't like fucking lunatics. Like I really like guns, but I fucking hate the NRA. I like the idea of businesses being able to operate as they please in some ways, but you have to acknowledge that climate change is real. Like you can't be delusional about this. Or I like personal responsibility and all that, but like how the fuck are you gonna ban abortion? Like there is no sane conservative or Republican party right now in the United States for I'm conservative or I want to be a conservative, but like god damn, those motherfuckers over there are crazy. But I feel like the issue is that the left is increasingly kind of like flying off into the side as well. So we kind of saw it under Biden. Maybe there's going to be kind of like this reorganization of both parties, catering more towards like the moderate centers of the party. Maybe, I don't know, but it's hard to say because
Biden's very progressive. Like he
Biden
markets himself as a moderate, but if you look at his policies, he's very progressive.
Sure, but compared to where like the internet culture is or the left wing of the party is, he's still like fucking Hitler, right? Like a lot of people say, a lot of people online will be like, I know people say shit like Bernie Sanders is a moderate, and then also these people have no concept of fucking worldwide politics. It's like, all of American political parties are very, very, very far right on the worldwide spectrum. Like socialism is super popular all across Europe. It's like, no, it's not. The fuck are you talking about? That's not true anywhere. Why would you even say that? And people just have both wings of the parties are very crazy right now, but the left wing of the Democratic Party is relatively small, the crazy part I would say, but the right wing of the Conservative Party is fucking wild, okay? Like 90% of these people would literally suck Trump's dick if he came out and said, suck me off and I'll help you in your election, unironically, right? Or like I think it's still half the Republican Party believes the election was actually stolen, like illegal votes were cast and shit. So I don't know. It's hard. The Republican Party is fucking lost. As much as I complain about the crazy left people online today, there's a lot of problems on the right. Holy shit.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I want to go into like hardcore, like borderline, like schizo posting here, but okay. I mean, like where did
schizo posting come from? Where'd you get that?
Schizo posting? It's like an internet meme. Like
okay, gotcha. Just checking. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. To like go into like sort of craziness, just a little bit of craziness. I think we can sort of question how ideas spread to each other, right? And so like, I think we'd both agree that there are certain traits of a belief system that are going to make it more or less likely to spread. So like, if part of your belief system is that it's necessary to like talk to other people and evangelize so that they can like be with you and maybe enjoy the fruits of heaven, right? If that's part of your belief system, it's going to spread faster than a belief system that part of the belief system is that it needs to be kept, secret and no one can know about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there are certain qualities of like progressivism, and the fact that progressivism tends to take root in like intellectual and mass media institutions that make it like very effective at spreading, versus conservatism. The right-wing ideologies tend to be spread more through like church gatherings, smaller communities, or like just having children and spreading it from parent to child. And so it's sort of this evolutionary understanding of how belief systems grow and spread. And the belief systems that are most viral are going to become dominant. They're going to become mimetic across time. And so I think also like humans are a dominant species on Earth. We're incredibly dominant. And so when we look at the species that survive well on Earth, species survive or die based on how they're able to negotiate with the human domination of the Earth, right? So like corn survives extraordinarily well. If you look at like genetic propagation and biomass of corn, it's extremely effective at existing on large scales. And it's extremely effective by having evolved in a way that humans enjoy. So I think sometimes if we look at political systems, if there's a political system that is extraordinarily effective and, you know, takes political or cultural control of large scale institutions, then it's also going to become politically effective for another political ideology to sort of play the role of the corn, and that is adopt traits that make it like easy to be predated upon. Are you familiar with the leftward ratchet effect?
Nope.
It's this like lefty meme. Basically, they like propagate the idea that like Republicans move the culture or politics left, and Democrats prevent it from going, or Republicans move the culture right, and Democrats prevent it from moving left.
The worst YouTuber in the history of all of YouTubers, I think Second Thought might have talked about this.
Yeah, and it's crazy because that's the exact opposite of what happens, right?
Okay,
like Republicans are notoriously bad at actually like passing anything because to talk shit on Republicans a little bit, they don't really have like a cohesive like guiding ideology. Like we got tax cuts under Trump, and you know, a few like disastrous, you know, foreign policy things, but we didn't really, you know, there was no like guiding right-wing political ideology behind Trump. And so I think that in some sense, if the right was growing to be like really strong and to seriously challenge left-wing progressive thought, it might just get like stamped out. And so it might actually benefit right-wing thought ideologically or evolutionarily to sort of make itself a prey, make itself a target, and to be sort of crazy and out there. I don't know if that's exactly true, but you know, that is like a sociological explanation for why the right wing can sort of really lack any sort of guiding principles or any real coherency.
Maybe. So there's that. There's probably like a million ways by which you can analyze why any political movement propagates the way that it does, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but I think
absolutely.
that another way that I would look at it, a lot through the framing that I used earlier, and I tried to look at everything through one framing so you get lost that way, of course. But like, I think that the fact that in real life we're segregated really heavily too, similarly to online spaces, to where in real life conservatives tend to live, like you can look at maps all across the world, and in almost every country in the world, you have blue cities and red non-cities. It's like it's almost ubiquitous. And I think that separation also is very real and can explain people's values sometimes. And it's something that, because people that live in those red areas tend to not have that same representation in other parts of the culture, people aren't always aware of it. When Trump got elected, you mentioned before the idea of like, well, if we just shun people and we shove them off into kind of other spaces, you know, maybe they'll go away or maybe they'll stop being radicalized. I'm not speaking just myself. I speak for everybody when I say nobody was expecting Trump to win. That was there were at least 6 different moments where Trump said something and you're like, oh, it was funny to watch him, but like he's gone. Making fun of McCain for being a war hero, no way, he's done. Grab him by the pussy, no way, he's done. Calling Ted Cruz's dad the fucking Zodiac, he's gone. There's no way that you can survive this many insane, like being pro Planned Parenthood as a fucking Republican, impossible, right? Speaking out, like, yeah, there's just so many crazy things as you said, and none of it mattered. But I think something that hurt a lot of people was, I think a lot of people genuinely did not believe, or at least a lot of people on the left genuinely did not believe that there were that many conservatives on the right that still existed in this country, because they'd been shunned from mainstream media for so long, and they'd been shamed and like, you're not allowed to think this, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to be this way. And so we figure, oh, well, they must be gone, but they're not gone. They're still there, and they're half the American voting population, you know?
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's this massive disconnect between the people who are in cities and they're talking with their, you know, city liberal friends about, you know, what is correct and worth thinking and believing in, or what values are good, And it's just, not totally a misunderstanding the actual politics of the country. Like, people will sometimes shit on Biden for, like, not doing, like, the most progressive thing ever. And
why didn't Biden single-handedly, like, change immigration, give us healthcare, abolish all student loan debt? Like, Jesus Christ. Yeah.
And ignoring just, like, the actual political practicalities of these things. The other thing is, like, it would be deeply unpopular to, like, bully your way through political systems, to, like, force through very progressive things. Like, that would just be a complete disaster for the Democratic Party.
And in some cases, even impossible. Like, the system wouldn't even allow it.
Right. And oftentimes impossible. So yeah, it definitely seems to me that there's this massive disconnect. And I agree that there's, like, technological reasons for that. I wonder, though, what you think the solution would be to, like, help address that.
I don't have any solutions for it. These are all, like, grand problems with society. Something that I say a lot that is really unfortunate when it comes to things like sexism or racism is I really truly do feel like we've done a really good job in society at solving, like, almost all of the easy problems. Like, we don't walk around just calling people the N-word or lynching people. We don't tell women, you're not allowed to do that, you're a woman, right? All of the ways that these problems manifest are, like, far more subtly.
They require, really, like, books to be written on them to explain how they're
bad. To even begin to, like, I think I can probably explain to my kid why it's wrong to call somebody a racial slur. I don't know. It would be very hard to explain to him why it's bad to say that, like, we should accept different types of hair, because if we don't, some people that have certain types of hair could feel excluded, and we don't want to make, like, that's a really hard concept to explain to somebody, Or maybe it's not hard, but they're going to need to, like, have a base level understanding. They're going to need to want to engage in that topic, and, like, it's just something, a lot of the easy problems in society have just been kind of solved for, and that sucks.
Yeah, no, I agree absolutely. I think that also, if you look at, like, hunger, right, or, like, general human well-being, or the poverty line, we're in so much better of a place than we used to be. And it doesn't make news headlines when you don't get involved in another war, right, by definition, or, when things just improve slightly year after year. So it seems to me that we simultaneously exist in perhaps the most materially prosperous era in human history, and the safest era in human history, and the fairest, by not having, like, wide-scale slave societies and stuff. And yet there are people, lots of people, especially in my generation, who have this perception that that the world is, like, fucked, right?
The worst time, because the language got so much more, like, I don't know if I truly don't know. I'd be curious. Maybe I lack the perspective. I don't know if, like, no, I do know this. In the 90s, generally, we weren't saying we live, like, in a white supremacist society. Because, like, we're past, like, we did civil rights and everything, and that's awesome, Today, we live in a white supremacist, not white, we'll say white supremacy. Everything is white supremacy. And, like, when you're fed, like, these types of narratives where, like, everything is so fucked, everything is so horrible, you've got, like, Colin Kaepernick is doing videos comparing NFL players to, like, fucking slaves and shit. And it's like, damn, like, really? Is that really where we're at right now? Is this not, like, are we being a little bit too extreme here? Or, it makes it hard to give. We need to give credit for the progress that has happened, because people are just sometimes are a little bit unrealistic. This ties into, like, 52 other things. Almost looping back to that trans thing. I don't like how people have taken like, language from psychology or trauma, and they've co-opted that to describe every fucking facet of the human experience. Where, like, let's say that you go to class and your teacher does a microaggression for you, you're like, you have trauma now. That's, like, a legitimate form of trauma. You've been traumatized, and everything is traumatizing, and white supremacy. And it's just, I don't know how to make those conversations publicly better. I do my thing, but I'm definitely in the minority. And, like, people like Hassan or, like, like, these types of, like, larger figures that just kind of, like, play into that extremist culture or whatever, are definitely selling all the tickets and shit. So I don't know what the solution is to any of that ever, unfortunately.
Right. It seems like there is, like, an incentive to sort of spread this extremist message and to really dig in and wedge, these problems and make them seem worse than they are.
Yeah.
And in some sense, I think it forces you to really fundamentally question the purpose of like societal progress. Because if you create all of this societal progress and yet people are engaging in opioid use at higher rates and anxiety is increasing and people are, less willing to like bring children into the world, you have all of these like metrics of like decline. You sort of have to ask, like, what is the actual meaning of like GDP figures going up? What is that actually telling you, if not that things are improving?
Yeah, and then you get into really weird, to loop back even more to our conversation where people are like, oh, this is what we need to do for feminism, this is what we need to do that, right? When you don't want to acknowledge the descriptive reality of what's happening, you start to create space for other figures that are willing to acknowledge those descriptive grounds. You cede that space to them, and then you give them the power to tell people how to live their lives. So for instance, women are talked about a lot societally as being less happy today than they were traditionally. And it seems like every indication is that this is true. I've never heard an empirical attack against that. That does seem to be a true thing. But because people on the left are so unwilling to cede any ground at all, even if it means acknowledging, like, okay, yeah, there are some cases where women are less open, then you end up in this world where, like, when you have a political party or a group of people that are telling you something isn't real or isn't happening, then people are going to be like, well, hold on, this doesn't match up with my reality. I'm not going to agree with that. And then you end up giving so much more power to these other more radical figures, and that's kind of annoying as well. Yeah.
I think that's true to an extent. I do think the left is willing to cede this ground. And I'll give you an example. The problem, though, is that the left, their explanation for this is that we're just not left enough, right?
Enough, yes.
We're not in the communist utopia.
That's why Bernie lost. It's not because he was too far left. He just didn't go left enough. Or that's why, this happens because, Or this idea that, like, everybody actually agrees with us. They just don't know it yet for whatever reason. This type of stuff comes up a ton,
Right. So even as society gets, like, more and more progressive over hundreds of years, and you see, like, some of these metrics don't indicate, like, great results. And I'm not necessarily blaming that on progressivism. Like, frankly, I would just identify as like a moderate right liberal type person. But I think you do have to like sort of question like the narrative that if we just go like the next step leftward, things are going to get better.
Somebody, a conservative that I used to debate a long time ago, he disappeared from my computer because fucking Irish lady made death threats against him. But a question was...
One second. Is it Excuse Me? Okay.
Yeah. Wait, how much of my shit do you watch? The fuck?
Okay. Excuse Me specifically. I watched his debate with Irish Laddie.
Oh, okay.
Like a long time ago. And it was like...
I him a lot, but he's a smart guy. I enjoy the challenge of talking to him. Like, it forces me to like really stake out my positions and understand why I believe the things that I do. So I appreciated that from him. But I was going to say something that he asked me once. It was a really good question, and I'd never even stopped to consider it for a microsecond before. It had to do with like things related to affirmative action. And he was like, okay, you think that women don't have enough representation in these places, right? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And he's like, you agree there's some probable, like, there's probably going to be a natural difference between men and women in these positions, right? Even if all else equal. And I'm like, yeah, there's probably some natural difference. And he's like, okay, well, how do you know when to stop? How do you know when you've gone far enough? I had no fucking idea because I don't have a metric by which I examine, right? Like, here's a question. Like, how much affirmative action is necessary to, like, answer the question, like, okay, black people are no longer systemically disadvantaged. Now it's just up to, like, individual black people to take advantage of the system that exists that is, like, fixed now, right? Would we ever accept that answer if there still exists, like, some inequality between the two groups of people? Even if the fact of the matter was that, well, most of the issues have been fixed, right? That's a really hard question to answer, I think, and really hard to grapple with. And a lot of people don't think about it at all. At least I didn't at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you look at the current scholarly consensus or the leftward like push in the scholarly, arena, it's to look at these gaps in achievement or gaps in anything and to just assume that the explanation is racism. So if you have like a gap in wealth between black and white families, the assumption is going to be that that gap is because of racism and that the only solution is going to be to disproportionately benefit black families. So like Ibram X. Kendi, I mentioned reading his book. This is his entire concept of anti-racism. It's the idea that it's not enough to be neutral and to create policies that equally benefit both black and white people. Rather, policies need to be anti-racist. They need to explicitly benefit Black families more than white families. And part of that is, right, and if you're not explicitly benefiting Black families over white families, then you're being racist, right?
Still racist, yeah.
Right, and it's either racist or anti-racist in this way. And so I think, unfortunately, this sort of blind, like not looking into the explanation for why a gap might exist, because like realistically, some of that gap probably is because of racism, right? That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know what proportion of it is racism, what proportion of it is just like wealth lagging behind, right? I don't know exactly the answers to those things, but the progressive solution is just going to be like throwing money and resources at the groups. And I think in a sense that like disincentivizes a group of people from, you know, changing, right? Or adapting or doing things differently, right? And so if there is like, if there is some like bad habit, right? So like Coleman Hughes, he says that like something like 25% of like the wealth gap between Black and white families could be eliminated by just changing like spending habits. I don't know if that's true. He cites a study, but I haven't seen the studies refuting it, so it could be wrong. But if that is true in the hypothetical world where it is, then if we're just throwing money to like shorten this gap to reduce it to nothing, then eventually you're going to reduce that gap to nothing, but the spending habits are going to remain, and you're just going to be like sinking money year into year to like support spending habits, which aren't good.
I agree. One of the really scary implications right now of like stuff that's going on is holy fuck, the difference in educational attainment between men and women is crazy. Have you seen how huge the gap has gotten? It's like 40-60.
Especially in minority communities.
Yeah, holy fuck, that's not good.
No.
And that's like a question of like, okay, well fuck, okay. But the thing is, and I read this from, there were educators. I don't know if this was a Slate article or if it was somebody that emailed me about their university. I don't remember. Fuck. A lot of people in like different areas email me things, so I get like perspectives of different areas. But like the consensus that I've heard, and this might not be true, so I'm warning you that. But like you couldn't even begin to talk about that problem in an academic setting. Like, hey, maybe women are doing okay in school now, and now we need to shift their focus back to men. You could never have that conversation in an administrative setting. It's impossible. And that's probably a problem, you know? Yeah,
and I think that's like the stifling of different opinions that we talked about earlier, and the inability to like really question or get out of our echo chambers. And it was like such a meme. And I think people took it too far with like the marketplace of ideas. But like sort of thinking about it now, I do think that there's like a kernel of truth with that. And like we do need to have ideas competing and questioning each other.
Or like I don't want to give conservatives credit here, or the anti-SJW bros or whatever. I do. The problem is that like back then, the people that were representing the marketplace of ideas, they were dog shit losers that didn't do it well. Okay, I will never get to a place in my life. Well, hopefully not. God forbid. Where I'll ever say some shit like, you know what? Dave Rubin had a really good point here. No, Dave Rubin has always been a dog shit, dumb fuck, anti-intellectual moron. Okay, but like the lack of challenge for people on the left, I think, did go a bit too far. And now like. Now, the way that conservatives used to engage with those concepts of like the marketplace of ideas, I think was really bad. But like there is a legitimate way that we can engage with those ideas in a positive manner, I think. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. And a lot of the conservative champions for these ideas have definitely not been very good or very credible. And like Jordan Peterson, he's another one of these people who like, frankly, he's like really not good at talking about ideas. He has this thing that like my friend was linking me. He'll tell people to like be a monster, right? And to like embrace some sort of like monstrous internal side of you. And every time he says this, he has to like walk back and explain what the fuck he means because people are confused by it. And I think he's just like not good at communicating these ideas, or maybe he just likes like people
being confused and then having to be like, no, actually, you're misrepresenting me and my beliefs are different, right? But
he does this constantly. One of the ways that I explain this is he'll always make descriptive statements, but he'll never make prescriptive statements sometimes. So he will lead you, right? He'll say like, well, when women are in the workplace, it causes a lot of problems. Well, men compete over women in the workplace. Women in the workplace have led to these negative things. And then you'll be like, and then an interviewer that's not ready to deal with him, an interviewer will ask, are you saying that we shouldn't have women in the workplace? And then it'll be like, interviewer, straw man's Jordan Peterson, claims that he says things that he never said. And I understand why people get so confused sometimes, because Jordan Peterson will say things where it's like, are you trying to get at this? But he'll never actually go like that final step. And he might not even necessarily mean that, to his credit, because like, as much as I don't like him, he doesn't seem like an idiot, at least. But yeah, he definitely, well, he seems, everything he says about psychology is generally pretty true. But when he starts getting into like history, sociology, or politics, God forbid, or philosophy, sometimes it gets really bad. But when he talks about psychology, it's usually okay. But I understand why people get confused sometimes listening to him do his stuff. Yeah.
I don't know if you did you see like the Zizek debate with Peterson?
Oh God, I saw part of it. Yeah, where he tried to learn communism like by reading the manifesto. And
Yes.
That was it or whatever.
Yeah. He like only talked about the Communist Manifesto, which, yeah, no, it was just a complete disaster. And
yeah,
you can really see that like every time he sort of talks about communism, he like really does not understand the ideas, and it gives leftists like so much ammunition to be like, you're just completely wrong, or like you're misusing these terms, and like they're correct, right? Because he is misusing the terms, and he is like not understanding the theories. So, but like at the same time, Zizek or Peterson, I think he described it as like cultural Marxism, and like fucking awful branding. I don't know why he uses these words, but like I think he's like essentially getting to like a good idea, which is like the evolution of Marxism into like the cultural sphere in America. But of course he has to use cultural Marxism, which is like an antiquated like Nazi conspiracy theory.
Yeah, or postmodern cultural He'll just like throw whatever crazy
postmodern like neo-Marxism.
Yeah, like what the fuck, dude? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I wish that these figures, it feels like a really weird clout content farming game where everybody is Steven Crowder. Nobody truly wants to step to somebody that can challenge their ideas in a rigorous manner, even in a friendly manner. But instead, we all just spend time, not we, because I don't do this. I'll talk to any motherfucker, okay? But everybody will spend all their time trying to farm college kids or like random dipshits instead of like, I want to see Steven Crowder, like debating Sam Cedar, okay? Or I want to see like these big people on the left having debates with like Jordan Peterson and shit. I want to see that. I want to see Anna Kasparian talking to Jordan Peterson. I want to see these kinds of conversations. But it seems really hard to get these like titans to match up against each other because everybody's just kind of like safely, like farming, easy clappas or whatever in the background. Do you ever play a game called Eve?
I've never played Eve.
Okay.
Tell
But
me
yeah,
about it,
anyway,
though.
yeah. What? Well,
I know it's like a space game where you like
there's a
build
phenomenon
stuff.
in that game where everybody acts like they're super hardcore, but they're not. People only take like easy fights. If you see somebody that you can beat up on, then you go and you kill them, and nobody takes a challenging fight in that game ever, and it's so fucking boring. But people always talk about how it's like the coolest thing ever. It's like, no, it's just a bunch of fucking losers farming kill mouths. But yeah, sorry, it was a random thing, but yeah.
Okay, I had to delete my Twitter link from my Twitch because apparently if you have NSFW pictures on Twitter, you get in trouble. So
Yeah, you could, yeah.
I just deleted that.
Good job.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think it speaks to like there's like a market demand for being able to easily beat down on people, right? And to score easy points against people. And so that does not incentivize people having challenging, difficult conversations. If a challenging, difficult conversation can get you clipped and destroyed, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not a good environment for truth to flourish at all. And so I think that sometimes like leftists have like good analysis. And I think this is like one of the examples of like the profit incentive is not towards like truth, good conversations, and building a better future. It's towards destroying people, towards making yourself look good, and towards like misrepresenting
Being a celebrity.
people. Yeah, being a celebrity.
That's all you want, is to increase your own personal clout. And you'll even get people, not to rag on him too much, because we've hit on Vosh a few times. I don't mean to like single him out. But like where like Vosh has constructed this like elaborate set of rules that basically makes it so that like he can only talk to people that are more popular than him, but never anybody that's less popular than him. And like he's like utilitarian justification is, well, if I ever platform somebody that's less popular than me, then they have the capacity to gain an audience off of me, which I never want that to happen. So I can only talk to people that represent an ability for me to grow myself, so that I can spread my ideology in a positive way or whatever. And but he basically, despite the fact that he grew debating larger figures, because it's the only way you can grow, now he's like, I can never debate somebody that would challenge me lower than me. I can only go for like higher figures. So like all of these people in their minds have this idea where it's like maximum clout farming, but there's really good moral reasons for it. It was like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, to me that sounds like sort of like a post hoc like justification.
A little bit, maybe.
Where you start with something that you want to do and you sort of just justify it afterwards.
Yeah, that might be the case. That's a very salient point you raised, yeah.
I'm glad you think so. One thing about religion that I like is that it sometimes forces you to like engage with things not because you want to from the beginning, but because you're adopting like a broader framework. So if you like go out shopping for a religion that already justifies everything you already believe in and discredits everything you don't believe in, what you're really doing is you're just like justifying your own beliefs. You're not really challenging yourself. But you can find a lot of meaning in actually like wholly adopting a belief system, even when it requires you to make certain sacrifices in life. And that actually can make it feel like a lot more meaningful. And you can derive, a lot more from engaging in a belief system that requires some sacrifice than one that just lets you do whatever you want, right?
Sure. Or at the very least, it's worth it to understand the belief system, to know why somebody would do this sacrifice. At the very least, that level of engagement can be important.
Yeah, for sure. That was thank you, Destiny. Good stuff.
Yeah, no problem. Well, are you like seen as like a Nazi online then, or what?
A Nazi? I hope not. I'm Jewish, so that would be
Doesn't
not
matter.
great.
People still call you a Nazi, so.
Yeah, no. I don't talk about politics too much. I'm just like moderately on the right, like center right. So.
Interesting.
Which I've gotten people like on TikTok and stuff be like, wow, like a trans person who's not a communist, like insane.
Because the whole LGBTQ community got fucking co-opted by that cringy commie socialist shit on Twitter. It's like even sex workers. It's like you're in like two huge crowds. Like all of them are communists and socialists. Like every fucking it's so cringe.
It's really rough. And I've definitely have like friendships where we just like don't talk about politics because we disagree so much, and we know that if we start talking about politics, it's gonna be like a meltdown.
Yeah. Well, anything else?
I think that's it. I'm glad you were able to talk to me. It was pretty fun. Hopefully we were able to, I think we were able to get pretty deep. We didn't like spend too much time on the trans stuff, but I think we brought it to like a pretty meaningful place.
Sure. Or is there anything else? Did you want to loop back? Do you believe in like, well, here, let's start with this.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that these okay, I'm going to jerk myself off. I don't mean to. The conversations sound really boring with people that have thought about this work, because I think we end up agreeing on almost everything. But like, but nobody seems. So here's a question: do you think there is an underlying? I'll start with the most one. Do you think there's an underlying fact of the matter about your gender? Is there like a truth value to like in your brain? Do you have a gender identity that is more male or more female?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. And I don't think it matters. So like one thing that I think makes me sort of unique in the trans space is that it doesn't actually matter to me that much whether or not someone calls me like a woman or a man, right? People will make whatever estimation they make about me. At the end of the day, that's just how it works. But fundamentally what I care about is like being able to just like live my life how I want to and like present the way that I want to. And as long as someone's like allowing me to like transition and to present female and to like wear dresses and makeup, these are like things that I've always liked doing. They can like internally think that I'm male or whatever. As long as they're not like outing me in like dangerous positions, then I think I'm okay with it.
So do you believe in like other gender things like I think they're broadly referred to as xenogenders? you know what that means?
They're like the Tumblr like star gender, autism gender, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you think that like any sort of identity, or literally, I don't say this as an insult, but like attack helicopter gender. So like Demon Mama will defend this concept that like if that's how you express your gender, it's a valid form of gender expression. Do you think that like all of these things are legitimate genders, or do you draw a line anywhere, or?
So legitimate genders. I mean, I think that like gender is probably a social construction, right? So like I could imagine a society where there is like an autism gender. I don't really know what that means because I don't have a conception of that in my society. But I think we could imagine that as like a cultural thing, Yeah. But in the society now, I don't think that really is a gender, I guess. And there's obviously, I think, no like underlying biological fact of the matter that like compels people to identify as autism gender. So like, I do think that there's like an underlying biological fact of the matter that like compels me to want to engage in some sort of like feminine presentation, right? That does seem like quite intuitive to me because like I watched your Mr. Girl discussion and I think if someone could talk me out of being trans, I would take that in a heartbeat, right? I would definitely allow myself to be talked out of being trans. And the fact that like that does not seem at all conceivable to me that I could someday do that indicates to me that there is probably some sort of very deep-rooted part of my brain that is, you know, not going to be changed easily.
Okay, that I think so. It sounded like you disagree, but it sounds like we majorly agree. Maybe we just identify this, or we use different words to describe this. But
I think so.
I would say that it feels to me, when I say there's like a fact of the matter, what I mean is that like, if I wanted to, I couldn't just decide a different gender tomorrow or change that. Or like, just like, well, I'm going to pretend to be this and I'm going to feel that way. Like, there seems to be some deep internal part of me that maps onto something in my brain that's like, I feel masculine or I feel non-binary. I feel like that seems to be a thing that exists. The reason why the only reason why I ask is because all the xenogender stuff will kind of like fall from there. So if I believe that, I don't think that you can identify as like autism gender. That's not like a gender. I don't know if we have like the internal mapping or construct to have a gender that is autistic. I don't know if that makes sense. It seems like we all kind of fall on this masculine feminine dichotomy. That seems to be the case, or binary or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think that when we talk about gender, you have to understand that there's like a political project, and that political project is aimed towards gender abolition, right? And so
I don't know what that means. I feel like it goes back and forth, but go. Yeah, what do you mean by that?
When people on the internet are talking about xenogenders and they're validating them, I think the reason why they want to validate them is because on an ideological level, they think that it will help to deconstruct and remove gender, right? Gender abolition. It'll help to abolish it. And so I think that that's really the goal of xenogenders, is to like poke fun at the concept of gender and to discredit the idea and to reduce it to just sort of a basic identity rather than tying it to what I think does exist. And that is some internal biological impulse to align yourself with one of the two sexes.
Gotcha.
And if I had to guess, I would say that there is probably a real internal biological mechanism that encourages you to, you know, align yourself one way or the other, or be comfortable with one way or the other. And then I think when you see like the cultural practices that are associated with that sex, right, the part of your brain that like believes that you want to be that sex, is going to tell you that you should engage in those sorts of practices in order to like validate that feeling that you are that sex, even if you aren't really. So I think that's like kind of the explanation of the biological mechanism and the cultural interplay.
Probably, yeah. Okay, I don't think I would necessarily disagree with that. Okay. What else? Was there anything more specific about trans that you want to talk about? Yeah, go.
Trans DIY. I think that
we kind of hit on,
your takes on trans DIY are sort of incongruent with your takes on drugs more generally. Because it seems to me that you believe people are justified or okay with taking drugs, even like illicit and potentially quite dangerous drugs, if they accept the responsibility of the effects and do their due diligence to like research them. And I think that like hormones, especially not so much testosterone, but especially estrogen, is something that the effects of it are, they're seen on the time scale of months or years, and they're not something you are ever going to overdose on. They're just going to be converted into harmless molecules in the body. So it seems to me that like on the scale of doing drugs, like gray market hormones is like very much on the justified end versus doing more illicit substances. I think you can justify both, but it seems to me like you justify the more extreme version of drug use, but then somehow draw the line at like a much more okay form of drug use or a much less dangerous form of drug use.
Yeah, I think I talked about this earlier, where I said that like I don't necessarily have problems with the do-it-yourself hormones. It was the culture of people online surrounding it that made me really uncomfortable. And I gave that example of that one. There's some crazy lady that was like bragging about like, I've talked to like 7 minors this month and I've gotten them doing yourself hormones, and that felt like really weird to me. If I were to draw a 1-to-1 comparison to drugs, I think I would actually still feel pretty much the same. I think there'd be a big difference between somebody online saying like, I really wanted to try heroin, and you know what, I did research, blah, 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 versus somebody that's like, I got 7 of my friends into heroin and I'm so proud of myself for doing it. Like, I think that the feeling there is a little bit different. And then I would also say that like doing a drug, I think is a bit different than using a drug to change into a new identity or to match like a gender expression. I think that these are fundamentally different things. But that, even all that being said, even though those two aspects are different, I don't think I'm opposed to do-it-yourself hormones, like done in a reasonable, responsive manner. I think, like I said at the beginning, in some countries you're on like a 2-year wait list for shit, and that might be like too late for a lot of people. And if you do the research and do-it-yourself hormones seem fine, then I think I'm okay with that. I just get really weird about the culture around it. You mentioned like the anime profile pics and the My Little Pony people that are like bragging about like roping minors into do-it-yourself hormones and shit, and that seems really fucking weird to me. Yeah.
There's some like crazy discords too, where people are like bragging about getting like minors to like cut themselves and take hormones, and yeah, insane shit for sure. So I agree that that culture is bad, but I'm glad you clarified that like do it yourself or like gray market drugs are not necessarily bad. It's more sort of like the culture around it that you'd want to seriously challenge.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've said as much. I don't know if it's come across in all my debates, but every time I bring it up on stream, I always say that like, if this is the only case, there are reasons why people would do it. I can understand. I can empathize. Sometimes it's like literally your only option, unless you're going to wait for years or whatever. But man, that culture online is real fucking weird.
Yeah, I have some trans friends, and they believe that this is like one of your sort of like worst takes around trans issues. So I definitely wanted to challenge you on it, because I agreed. I think that like it did seem like a little bit inconsistent to me. So I feel satisfied with your clarification.
Sure. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you prefer to be called Steven or
Steven.
Destiny? Steven. Okay. Thanks for talking, Steven.
No problem. What do you go by online?
April's good, or Taff.
April. Okay, because you have like 20 different names.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Okay, cool. Well,
but yeah, everything like officials, all Taff.
So. Are you trying to get more into like the screaming at people online for politics stuff, or was this just a conversation you were interested in? Or I don't know if you do like Twitch panels or anything like that.
I don't. I'd love to get more into it, because I think that you have to really build like a personality, not cults, but like you need to build those relationships on the internet with people. And
Gotcha.
Twitch politics seems crazy as far as harassment. Last year, I wasn't even in like politics, but like I was getting people like harassing me on the internet, and I had to like take a break. But I think that I've, in coming back and having experienced like that level of like harassment, I feel like a lot more comfortable with just being like whatever, and sort of jumping into like the politics sphere, even though it's extraordinarily vitriolic.
It is, yeah.
I think part of me in like a weird way enjoys like a little bit of vitriol, which probably sounds insane, but like there's like something satisfying about sort of getting to butt heads with people a little bit.
I feel the same way. I understand 100%. So yeah. Okay. Well, cool. I've said this before. People call me transphobic. I don't care. The trans community online is absolutely fucking insane. So having like more reasonable trans people is really good. It's embarrassing to say this, but like I have to remind my audience every time when I intersect with these communities that like in real life there are tons of really cool trans people. There's a lot of really reasonable ones, but for some reason it's only the most extreme, insane, socialist, communist, like most radical people that you ever find online in these communities, which is really disappointing. So yeah, if you want to get involved, I think that would be really cool.
For sure. I think that you've been like a good introduction, because you seem pretty reasonable and like willing to listen to me out, even though that like you say that I'm reasonable. There are things that I'm like also crazy on. So
sure, it's not so much like the when I say reasonable, I don't necessarily mean like we agree on everything even necessarily. I just mean more like has a thought process, is willing to engage with ideas, isn't just going to instantaneously call me like a fascist, Nazi, Hitler, authoritarian, like is like can have a conversation, right? Yeah, these types of people are like sorely needed in this world. So both in Twitch politics and in like the actual real world. So yeah,
I think so. All right, thanks for talking, Stephen. Maybe we'll do it again another time if I have a bone to pick with you.
Sure thing. Just let you know. Okay.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Cool. Good stuff. I definitely feel satisfied with that. We talked for a while too. So good stuff. There's so many people watching. I'm gonna close out the stream, but it was definitely fun, and hopefully I can use this opportunity to rope more people into talking with me. That would be great. I'm going to update my YouTube channel. Destiny's chat was gushing over me. That's flattering, if true. Oh my god. Now all the COVID coughs are coming in. Okay, I'm gonna add a profile picture to my Twitch. Is what I want to do. How do I enable VODs? You should tell me how to do that. Socials. Should send your boyfriend application to my NSFW account, on the account that rhymes with only glands. That's where you should send it after paying me like $5. Creator dashboard settings streams. Okay. Okay. Store past broadcasts. Okay, cool. Okay, you can link to your stuff via Linktree. Oh, okay. Let's do a Linktree. All right, I'll set up a Linktree for sure. I'm glad you guys like put up with me, because I definitely feel like somewhat sick today, and it's rough. Oh, shit's brutal. Okay. My mic is very quiet. Oh dear. Is that true? That's not good. Okay. Linktree. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, guys. Okay. Okay. Pro or basic? Just gonna go with basic Linktree for now. Yeah, nice. It was definitely a fun conversation with Steven. He's a really interesting guy. I watched his Mr. Girl conversation, and he was talking about trans stuff. I think I watched like another thing where he was talking about trans DIY, and I was like, I want to talk to this person. Okay. Okay. I should do Dylan Burns' TV panel. Yeah, that would be awesome. And I think that I can be like a pretty reasonable conservative type person as well. Okay, creator dashboard. Oh my god, someone told me to turn up the audio earlier, and I was like, okay. But apparently that was a lie, and I shouldn't have. Unbelievable. Okay, good stuff. I can watch the chat now because I'm done fucking with things. How's it going? How's it hanging? Y'all vibing? Demand answers. How hard are you vibing right now? Pretty good. Vibe check is passing. Hungover vibes. Hi, are you just calling yourself a conservative because you're dissatisfied with liberalism and disagree with internet and business ideas of progressivism? I mean, I'm not. I think that the thing is that society needs like a mediating cultural or political force to prevent the left wing from just getting further and further left. Historically, we've seen the culture always move left, and eventually that's going to be bad if it's not bad already, right? And so you need some sort of conservative force like the Constitution to put a check on that. Or you need like a strong cultural institution like the church to like put a check on the leftward ratchet. Yeah, I mean, like conservative. I say conservative because I think that like time is going to make me a conservative. But like realistically, I'm just like somewhat liberal. Like if you were to like go back 100 years, I think I'd be like very much on like the liberal side, I'm probably like ignorant of the leftward ratchet. Yeah, I think that dysphoria can also manifest as positive feelings, but I think this is sort of like a misnomer to call it positive feelings. What really it is like the alleviation of negative feelings, which your brain will interpret as positive feelings. So like if I'm stabbing you like constantly, like applying pressure for years and years and years, and I take that pressure off, it's going to feel really good, right? And you're going to say, oh, this feels euphoric. Really, it's the absence of pain, but it manifests as like a positive emotion. Were you ever further left? Yeah, I used to be really far left back in like high school. Oh, this is a better angle for me. Fuck. Why didn't I do this earlier? Values that are conservative. I think fundamentally, like the desire to conserve social institutions and modify them or very slowly change them rather than abolish them. I think that's the fundamental difference between me and like progressive. Progressives, I think, fundamentally are looking to like tear down the wall that I talked about earlier. Yeah, I have heard the end of history in the Fukuyama sense, which, you know, the Cold War, the Berlin Wall falls, and he says that like liberalism is the end all be all, and he is definitely not correct. What are the type communal implementations that could imagine that we can use to combat these forms of progressivism instead of relying on ontological or religious institutions? So here's the deal. The left or the West right now, it's a really great society to be a dissident in, to be someone who disagrees with the political mainstream. Because fundamentally, like you're not going to be sought out and like tortured, right? You don't have like the KGB on your tail all the time. So what you should do if you are a right-wing person is you should go and you should marry someone and you should get a ranch and you should raise children with them. And you should have a good time and, you know, model the lifestyle that you like to other people. What do we think about AGP as a concept, as a typology? It might be correct. I don't know. I think that like, unfortunately, AGP is the kind of thing that no trans woman will ever admit to, like immediately. But the more you get to know trans women and the more you talk to them, and if you also understand the AGP framework pretty well, the more certain things they say will seem to like really fit the typology. So is it totally accurate? Extremely unlikely that like he got it totally accurate. But is there a grain of truth? Probably. Holy shit, transhumanism, the metaverse. Yeah, okay, and so here's the problem with like right-wing politics is they defer to these like insane positions like ethno-nationalism. Guys, don't be an ethno-nationalist. It's not good. Ethno-nationalism is not good. It's bad. So yeah. Ethno-nationalism is insane. ethno-nationalism is bad because it's not real. Like, it's just a fantasy. There's no like real underlying like difference between racial groups. At least there's like not good evidence for it. Maybe good evidence will come out in the next 20 years and I'll have to eat my words, but it doesn't seem like there's good evidence for it. And even if there was like some fundamental difference between black and white people, it wouldn't justify having an ethno-state. I'm being overly aggressive. Fuck yeah, that's the meta. That's how you act. That's enjoyable. Ethnicity isn't just a race, though, Taff. What if it's a language and culture that is only correlated with race? Here's my American take, okay, is that culturally homogenous countries, it's not good. One China, it's not good. You need to be able to integrate different competing ideas and mediate between them. And that's the brilliance of democracy, okay? Democracy that is steadfast with a strong constitutional system, a strong and somewhat conservative constitution. And then you add liberalism on top of that and free markets. Oh, that's a spicy meatball. Ex-Soviet countries that want to have their own culture and exist. I think there's like a way to do it, yes. But also I think that if you get to the point where you are banning people who have a different culture, right? Or mistreating people of a different culture rather than effectively mediating between them, as long as the culture is not like, you know, completely insane. Like, you know, we could have a culture that like loves like killing people, like hypothetically. But if that was the culture, then yes, you'd be justified in like stamping out that culture within your borders. But provided that's not the case, like we're not talking about some insane culture, then no, you know, you need to like be able to find ways to work with people and to like talk to them. And that's a mature position. You can't just throw a tantrum and like be like, oh, I'm making my own country every time there's a disagreement. Because fundamentally, politics is going to be filled with disagreements. And the essence of good politics is being able to mediate those disagreements. China being the good guys, helping countries that have been fucked over by the West, then the West calls it cultural genocide, blows my mind. I mean, the reality is that like China's not wholly good or wholly bad. Like their involvement in Africa is complicated. And it's not totally like fair to say that they're just like helping out other countries, because you know, it's very like selfishly minded ultimately. China wants to be a global superpower. They don't want to make Nigeria a global superpower. So I think you have to be sort of careful. But yeah, like China is doing some good things and some bad things. Do you ever worry your ideas are completely off base? I worry that the more complicated things get. Yeah, absolutely. My ideas are probably wrong in a lot of ways, frankly. You should know that. They're probably terribly wrong in many ways, and I'll have different opinions in the future. But you have to be able to adapt, and like having good ideas is the process of constantly evolving and changing your ideas as you come in contact with better ones. What's it like having booba? I have small booba, so it's not like much. China's not making countries their colony. Don't be dramatic. They're not even necessarily getting like unfair military bases. I'm glad you think my booba is nice. Oh shit, hold up. This was a good stream. I'll definitely do more of this. Okay, good stuff. Gonna end the stream there. It was fun, guys, for sure. And we'll talk to you later. I'll keep you updated on stream developments and stuff.